Hey everyone, I hope you're all doing well today. This time we are going to be talking about one of my favorite games, Oxenfree. There are really two stories going on in Oxenfree. The main story is Alex and her friends visiting an island for some kind of an end of school beach bash type thing. And then there's the story of the submarine crew that is trapped in an alternate dimension type place, and they are trying to cross over, and they're going to be using Alex and her friends in order to do so. Over the course of the game, you learn more about Alex and her friends, as well as the history of the island that they're on, which is Edward's Island, by the way. It's kind of a weird tourist trap type place with only one permanent resident on it. So in many ways, it feels like the trips that I made to the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, where there were not too many permanent residents in the area that we were at, but that's not relevant to this story. So we begin with Alex, Ren, and Jonas taking the last ferry to Edward's Island, and we learn that they have taken along a little radio with them so that they can use it in the Weirdo Caves, where it's said that you can tune into like strange radio signals. They meet up with Nona and Clarissa, and we learn a little bit, or get some indication, that Clarissa is kind of a bitch, or that she is dealing with a whole bunch of other stuff that is in some way connected with Alex. This kind of sets in motion a little bit of sort of personal healing and some other stuff that has to go on with Alex. She has to come to grips with the fact that her brother Michael died and that she has a brand new stepbrother in Jonas. It would be nice if they explored some of the other relationships with the different characters in this and how they relate to each other, but by focusing on Alex, it just tells a more focused story and it kind of narrows things down. It also gets you through the game a little bit quicker. Oxenfree takes place over one night, so you start off at about 10 p.m., and by 7 a.m. the next morning, you're leaving the island. Or so you think, but we'll get into that a little bit later. Anyway, they take the radio to the Weirdo Caves, and while tuning into the radio signals there, they unlock like a portal or something which allows the submarine crew that is trapped in this weird alternate dimension that you don't learn too much about. It allows them to kind of cross over into our world. This creates a series of sort of time loops and just weird instances that go on. So you have some of the people getting possessed. Alex gets possessed. She gets sent back in time to kind of relive conversations with her brother Michael, and also a non-bitchy Clarissa at times. It's kind of a cool way of doing this to help Alex come to grips with what was going on in her life, and also help her just kind of relate to what Clarissa is doing. It's a cool way to tell this story, and I really like it. The first thing that you're given, or the first real goal that you have, is to find everyone and bring everyone together. This is when you find out that Clarissa is kind of a target for the submarine crew, because they really want to use her in order to cross over. It's very interesting how all of this happens, but at times it can get a little bit confusing, which goes on with like the time travel and everything else that's happening in this game. Things in this game get explained a lot better in the sequel, which I've already covered in a separate video. While looking for your friends, you find a few spots where you can learn more about the history of the island, and also learn more about Maggie Adler, the lady who was the permanent resident but ended up dying. The second goal is to stop the spirits from crossing over into our world, and that's when things get a little weird and sort of help you diverge into different endings if you want to get them. Ultimately, it's up to Alex to deal with all the spirits, which we are led to believe that she can do this, and then we cut to them on the ferry riding back home. It's a little bit more involved than that, but I want people to kind of experience the story for themselves. Depending on how you treated the other characters and the different dialogue choices that you've made, the endings are going to differ slightly. Regardless of that, you end up getting a rundown of kind of how everyone is doing at the end of the game. Where Jonas ended up, where Ren ended up, where Nona's going, and how Clarissa's doing. And then you get this weird glitch that you've seen throughout the game, where all of a sudden the dialogue kind of resets, and Alex starts talking about going to the island again, and talking like the events of the previous night never really took place, which suggests the entire game is in a time loop. This makes a lot more sense when you play the second game, and when you finish it, you find out, yes, they were trapped in a time loop, and you were able to get them out of it. It's kind of a cool wrap-up and everything, where they're telling this longer story over the course of 2 games. I like it quite a bit, but it might not be for everyone. The gameplay in Oxenfree is very simple, but it's done really well. Oxenfree is an adventure game that is similar to King's Quest, Secret of Monkey Island, or Day of the Tentacle. You can't really die in this game, or at least I wasn't able to really die in this, which puts it in the same category as one of the LucasArts adventure games. You move your character around and select dialogue options, and then there are a few puzzles in the game which consist of turning your radio to the right frequency and also getting these different machines to kind of work right. The controls are very basic, so it's not going to confuse you with a complicated control scheme or anything like that. There are 2 radios that you get in this game. The first one is basically like an FM radio, and I don't think I have to explain this to people, but you never know. You just simply tune the thing to the right frequency, and then like music will show up or some tips will pop up, and you can use this at any time, but there are specific instances where you need to tune into the correct frequency. I didn't explore the radio as much as I probably could have, but it's a fun mechanic in the game. The second radio you get is... I'm not exactly sure how to explain it. It's like one of those ultra-frequency emergency radios, so it has like twice as many frequencies that you can tune into, and it's fine. It just makes things a little bit more complicated, like you have to scroll farther in order to get to the right spot. The second radio is the one that's harder for me to explain because I've never really used a radio like that. So, yeah, that's the one where I would like to tell you more about it, but I don't really know too much. It is used on some like radio frequency locks, which are kind of interesting that they introduce those. So you tune into the right frequency with this super duper radio, and it will unlock different doors and whatnot that were previously sealed to you. When you get caught into a time loop, there will be some machines that pop up, and you'll have to kind of tune those correctly with, I believe it's the right stick, if my brain is remembering all of this. I'm doing some of this off of memory, so I apologize. Those puzzles are not difficult at all. You just turn the analog stick until eventually the thing goes away, and then you can go back to reality and the time loop is fixed. Those are kind of fun, but they can be a little frustrating when you're trying to figure out exactly what the computer is, or not the computer, but what the game is expecting you to do. At times during the game, the spirits will pop up to give you a test on maybe the things that you discovered along the way. The first one feels like a history exam, and I think it's kind of stupid, because they're just asking you questions on things that you might have seen during the game, or maybe you didn't look for the right spot, or something along those lines. They don't really have a huge impact on the game, but they do impact like the people's, or the different characters' relationships with Alex. So if you aren't able to save somebody, they will lose their opinion of you will go down or something like that. Overall, I think the gameplay for this game is pretty good. It's simplistic, but it lets you focus on the story that the game is trying to tell you. It is quite a bit of fun to go through this and to just see how you can impact how the story goes and how people interact with Alex. It's a pretty fun way of doing things. You also have some options to replay the game and choose different dialogue options or choose different options on where you want to go. It's pretty great in my opinion. I really like the look of this game. Oxenfree has a dark and isolating atmosphere. The characters are trapped on an island, and at times they kind of have to wander around through the woods, and that just helps to make the game feel a little bit more urgent, or try to build like a horror atmosphere. Obstacles are pretty easy to see. You can easily tell where you need to climb, or where you are allowed to climb, or where there's a gap that your characters can jump over. It's pretty simple to get through this game, and I think that's part of the point, because you're just supposed to focus on the story and focus on the interactions between the characters. So the graphics are good in my opinion, and they go along with just the whole idea of getting you to focus in on the story and kind of build the creepy atmosphere of everything that's going on. At times the screen will kind of like glitch out, which is intentional, and it'll look a little bit like the tracking signal on an old VHS. Again, something that I probably should explain. Back before DVDs or streaming services, we had VHS tapes. They were kind of a crappy medium, but they're what we had. And if you watched them too long, you might see like tracking signals where stuff is a little bit staticky and it just looks like a line is being forced through the screen. They look really cool in this game, and it helps to tell you, hey, something crazy is happening, or the spirits are interacting with our world, and you're going to need to do a puzzle, or you're going to get a little bit more information about a certain event. It's a cool way of letting you know what's happening. And I think it's really cool because it just reminds me of being a kid and finding one of those spots on a VHS tape where somebody paused it for too long, or just seeing the way the tape is degraded over time just from you recording something over and over again. It's just kind of a cool thing that I really loved. Things also get a little trippy at times, besides the whole VHS tracking thing, where you get pulled into like a memory of some kind, and the whole screen will just get a lot brighter and everything, and it's really cool to see. Overall, I think the graphics are really good. They aren't going to blow you away or anything, but they work quite well with the story that the developers are telling. It's a nice-looking game that does a good job of using visual cues to tell the player what's going on, and it also helps to build just kind of this creepy atmosphere being trapped on an island by yourself. There's not a lot of lighting in this, and at times things are kind of weird and not the way they should be. And it really does feel like you're freaking yourself out a little bit by walking through the woods, which can happen at times. So after playing the second game, the first game's ending makes a lot more sense in some ways. Your characters are trapped in a time loop on that island, so everything else is progressing normally outside of this time loop, because it feels like it's kind of just a localized thing where you can get sucked into this other dimension like Alex and her friends are, where they're trapped in this time loop. In the second game, we find out that Alex is the only one that's aware of this time loop, or at least it seems like it. So Ren, Jonas, Nona, and Clarissa don't know that they're in this constant cycle of reliving this night. I'm not totally sure if that's true, but that's the way it seems when you play the second game. This one it's weird knowing what happens in the second game, where Alex is trying to get this weird cult of children to replace her and her friends in the time loop, or in this weird alternate dimension, which isn't totally explained, or if it is, I didn't quite pick up on the explanation. It's a really good ending, I think, and it did leave it open for a sequel, so that was pretty cool. It is sort of disappointing to know, like, oh, I didn't really win, or something like that. Or the ending I got wasn't necessarily canon because the events of the the events of the second game take place. Either way, I think the story was really good, and I do like the ending. The idea that they made it out, but not really, to where they didn't let the evil spirits into our world, but they didn't fully escape from what was going on. I kind of like that whole idea. And I do like the fact that you can get alternate endings in this game, but it is kind of disappointing that they don't always pan out the way that you would like them to. If they do make a third game, it would be interesting to see how that game plays out, and if it's its own standalone thing, or if it ties into the events from the first two. I don't know. I would like it to just sort of be its own standalone thing, and just be something separate from what's going on here, but yeah, whatever. I'm not the one making these games or writing these stories. Oxenfree has quickly become one of my favorite games, and it's also become one of my favorite series of games. I like the setting for this story, and I like the fact that these are kind of short games that you can sit down and play in an evening or something like that. There is quite a bit of replay value in these just because of the different dialogue options that are going on. When I first played Oxenfree a few years ago while streaming on Twitch, I had already watched someone else's playthrough, so I kind of knew what to expect, but I hadn't sort of carved out my own story that was a bit different from the one that I had watched, which made the game pretty fun to play. It has simple gameplay, great music, and the story is wonderful. I was more invested in the characters in this story when I first played it than I was the second time through. I also wanted to play this game a few times to kind of try to fix my mistakes that I had made in that first playthrough. And at the end, I just wanted people to be friends, even if Clarissa is kind of a bitch. Oxenfree is just a lot of fun, and it's one of the games that I would recommend to pretty much anybody, especially if you wanted to get back into games. And yeah, it's nice to go back and play this after playing Oxenfree 2. Anyway, that's going to wrap things up. Let me know what you think in the comments below, and I will talk to you all later. Bye.